feel started.
Fantastic. Wonderful. And then welcome. It's good to see everybody. It's been a couple of weeks. I think we had the autumn festival, Mid-Autumn Festival, which meant that our US Asia Pacific meeting didn't happen, and our colleagues in China had some well-deserved time off and a bit of time with family. So we're catching up after that. The major thing we want to do is really square away the target platform discussions so we can get on to much more interesting discussions, which are happening in parallel. Some of it's happening on Zulip, and some of it's happening in the WAMA team discussions, and it would be great to bring it here. And mainly the most interesting bits I've seen recently are all around shared memory and the implications for WASI in terms of zero copy passing of data between components, which sounds really exciting. But before we get there, we need to square away our target platform discussions. And that was part of our SIG charter when we said, look, let's set things up. We're going to do the embedded SIG. But in order to enable everybody to contribute to the conversation, we needed to communicate both inside the SIG and outside the SIG what we actually mean by embedded. And it's been going on for a little while now. The last updates was a PR that I proposed. It's up for comment. I didn't see any comments on it, any discussion on it. But essentially, we started to be quite opinionated, deliberately so, to try and drive conversation, to try and square away this document and get it kind of finished and out the door. So that PR is up. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at it. There was a reminder that Dominic sent out this morning, which was great. Thank you very much for that. But really what we want to do is just square this document away. I think if it's been quiet for a while, perhaps people are kind of happy with it. If you're not, this is the opportunity to comment on it, and I can bring it up and share it with you guys again as we discuss this, if that would help. But yeah, that's basically it, really, is trying to get this thing out the door so we can move on to much more interesting discussions. Has anybody looked at the PR? There's not a lot of comments. Really, see, we've got some that have jumped in since the post this morning, which is great. I've just suggested changes and discussion on the table. Ralph, do you want to give us some feedback?
Yeah, if I can find the mute button, and you can hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. I only had a couple of comments that were I think housekeeping in the spirit of what you were trying to aim at, Chris.
Yep.
Like to get things finished off. And a couple of them just recently. One was that there were and we're talking about the PR.
Yeah.
In step 3 minimum RAM and storage requirements, we have some sort of SWAGs there for kind of min. But then in the matrix of possibilities below, which is in number 5, we sort of don't have any of those filled out. And so one comment was, do we think we can take SWAGs at some of that in the matrix? Or is that in the Excel spread? Because originally it was an Excel spreadsheet.
Right, you're trying to get away from that Excel spreadsheet, weren't we? So I think we could
one way or another. I mean, I don't really like. I'm totally open-minded about where it is. Just want to get the SWAGs in there.
Just for communication purposes, I think it'd be awesome to have everything together in one document, unless there's any objection. It's
I like that too.
Much easier to communicate, and the reason why we're doing it, back to why we're doing this, is I think there was some discussion with folks, particularly in the WASM time team, who are looking at targeting an embedded platform and wanting to know exactly what it was we were targeting and why. We had initially some feedback on some of the design decisions that they were taking, and to give them the context for it, really. So I think putting it all together in a single document would really help. So yeah,
completely agree.
Let's completely do that. Let's put that in there. So we've got the need to do that. I think you put a comment to that effect in the PR, right?
Yeah, just yeah. I just said this remains unfilled, and so I'd love to get that sort of swag filled. To be quite clear, just like the minimum requirements, from my perspective, these are what we might call consensual suggestions. They're not meant to be unchanging, much like everything else here. It's meant to be a first stab, like a first pin in the cork board, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. So the goal is that we would use them when we had differences of opinions on scope. We'd be like, hey, we've got this document, it gives us a bit of a guide. Does this make sense?
Right,
And
exactly.
and when we put the document together, we realized that things technology always moves. So you can't fixate on it forever. This isn't a forever document, right?
Correct. And I like that. I like the language you used as well.
So was
So
that
before we do that though,
yes.
I was going to mention my last comment at the very bottom.
Mhm.
And there may be a simple answer to this, but this is truly an open-ended question because I don't know about what people have thought about in the community, but I was curious about the degree to which members here have used or discussed WASM Edge as well as the ones that are listed. If nobody has, or if we thought we weren't going to discuss it because it's not in the BCA, but in the CNCF, I'm not really concerned about that. I'm really just interested in the potential list of targeted runtime. So that was an open-ended question.
I'm staying quiet because I've done a lot of talking, but I'm just trying to be the organizer here, but not
Sure.
the
And I'm
people.
asking everybody else here.
Yeah.
Has anybody
Yeah.
thought about it? Used it? Do they want to have it in the target list? 5, 4.
I don't have a strong opinion about this. So I thought about it, but I'm okay with the things we have in the list. And
we can always change.
Yeah. I'm drawn to Vemma. So
sure. Yeah, I think Wimmer, for everybody here, Wimmer's the high order bit kind of thing. And then Wasm Time and potentially others. We've got WA0 here. So it was just a question of whether there was people had thought about Wasm Edge and hadn't put it in there. So that's good. As far as I'm concerned, that's not an addition. So we can go back to other people's interests or taking swag at the matrix there.
Any other feedback, comments, and suggestions? It's all good. The stunned silence. This is the most amazing PR anybody's ever seen. It's epic.
Yes. Epic. Yeah. So let me resolve the first one. I think we agreed. Yeah. And yeah. But the other comments, shall we build it in quickly or
let's go?
Yeah.
I'm happy to have a quick go at filling it in and just I want to get this out of the way because
I'm with you.
Much more exciting stuff to talk about.
Yeah, just swag it for now.
Yeah.
Just sorry.
Swag it. Silly wild ass guess. A swag. Just didn't take your shot. What we think it is, because we can submit PRs and adjust them as we go. Right. That's the point.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's kicked out the door and we can roll on to I'm itching to get talking about some of the stuff Christoph's been posting about this. So it's like, we've got this stuff we need to fulfill. Let's just get it out of the way. I think we spent a lot of time on it and had some great discussions. So
yeah.
We're nearly at that stage, I think.
Yeah. So I propose we go on with the discussion in the background. I will fix the stuff, the comments in, and give you a ping once I have uploaded it. So you don't need to painfully watch me type things. All right. We can move on with the discussion once I find my Zoom window again. It is.
Unless you want to, unless anybody wants to throw in the wild ass guesses all together in one go for that. But I'm good with just doing it, and we'll get it posted up later on today. And if there's no
Then
objections,
yeah, I was going to say, let's ask for objections. Does anybody have a specific powerful feeling about any entry in that matrix that we're looking at here in number, what is it, 5?
right. Hey Rob, would you like to share it? Because you're doing the right.
If I can, let's figure out how to share. There's a big green button. I cannot share while other participant is sharing. So you have to unshare, I think.
Okay, that's
Or
Dominic.
yeah, Dominic has to unshare.
I am lost for the unshare option in Zoom. Sorry for that.
No harm, no foul.
What the Teams user versus the Zoom user?
Yeah, definitely.
I can't even tell the difference between all of them now. Got so many.
I'm sorry for that.
No worries.
Stop sharing. This is
So on my screen, it is on the black bar at the bottom, right between React and AI Companion.
Yeah. I can share, but I cannot stop sharing there. I found it. Sorry for that.
There
Sorry
we go.
for the
not at all. Not at all. Okay, let's see if this works for you. In theory.
Yay!
Yay. Okay, and just to make sure, because this is a big old screen, let me see if I can bump it up size-wise just a little bit for everybody. This is number 5. So I can actually edit it on the fly.
Yeah.
But what I want to do is actually just propose. So this is the thing we're talking about. If we knock this out, we're really close to done with this document. And certainly as a first iteration, right? Like in keeping with Chris's excited desire, shall we say, because I agree. I am going to propose that Chris go ahead and take a swag, and then we can flog everybody to look at it and complain and submit PR updates and stuff like that. And he can do that on the background. We don't have to take time here. But I wanted to ask if anyone here had a specific entry, specific row in that they have a passionate belief about. And that can be an exception, right? Chris can do the other things, and then you can take a swag, and then we can all figure it out. Does anybody have any particular passions on this list? Five, four, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm going to propose that Chris take the bull by the horns. He's volunteered, which was a big mistake on his part. So Chris, why don't you take it offline and go ahead and swag it in, and tag us and send it around when you got the PR for that. And thank you very much for the work. I appreciate it. It does move everything forward.
Cool. One last question then on this. And it was an open question, I think, the last time we met, which was a while ago. So I know you probably forgot. Martin had this great question, because I know that Amazon focuses on embedded platforms. In fact, of all of the partners that join these calls, they probably have the most diverse portfolio of targets. And in that portfolio of targets are, I guess, a BSD derivative that runs on a PlayStation and a Windows derivative on the Xbox. So,
and that was, where was that? So if we do that and go here,
I think we discussed this in one of the meetings before, and we decided to exclude some of the platforms that are rarely used, and I was okay with that. But if we want to keep it in the table, I'll be happy to.
It's right here, I think.
Yes.
Okay. I thought that was a very good description of other alternatives, and essentially what the language I read was, it said we are aware and thinking about these examples, but because of their generalized cost, we're not necessarily including them immediately in any immediate actionability. That's sort of the way I read it, merely based on cost. Is that acceptable, Marsden?
Yeah, that is totally fine.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for
Because I
the
don't think it's out of scope by any means. It's just that we're kind of starting with the smaller devices first, and then as we move forward, we're expecting those devices to fall into scope.
I think, as I recall, maybe we should make sure that this is explicit in the document. This is a mental note for me when I watched back the video. It is that we were focusing on the platforms that were not being addressed by others in the community. So if we are embedded SIG, shouldn't we focus on particularly the embedded bits that aren't directly being addressed? So is the BSDs and Linuxes of the world, and the same applied for the real-time kernel patch for Linux, could they be addressed by others? Yes. Is this something specific that isn't being addressed by others? Well, yeah, and that would be the Zephyr, FreeRTOS, and NotX work. So I think that makes sense. Cool. Ralph, thank you very much. And thank you for the to-do. I take the action.
I appreciate it. I think this is great. This is something people can work with, man, and that I love. Thank you so
So now we get on to there are topics coming up. There's probably a huge collection of other bits and pieces that are happening. There's innovation. I know Max was driving around component model designs for microcontrollers, which was also really interesting, and some innovation in the API design space. And then there are the implications of shared memory and the canonical ABI and the binding mechanisms, how to do zero copy, sharing of data, which I saw in Christoph and Luke discussing as well. So there's other aspects there. And I think one of the most exciting things I saw from the Plumbers Summit, I don't know if anybody here got to join, was the push for Preview 3 and the desire, as Luke puts it on his slide, to kill the malloc, the realloc that's in the canonical API's current implementation. And those changes all look really exciting because it starts to point towards some of the issues certainly that we found in, and we had highlighted that would need to be addressed before we could adopt the component model and the canonical ABI more widely in the embedded space, and they're starting to be addressed, which is super exciting because it starts to open up the use case. But I am sure there's so much more we need to discuss. So I think one of the things we need to do as a embedded community is start to collect those topics together for discussion, things we feel that need to be driven forward, things that would, like shared memory, both be of interest to the WAMA team, the embedded community in general, but also have a wider implication for, you know, the canonical ABI and the WIT syntax and the work that's going on there, that we should surface and start that discussion off. Make sure we're coordinating, and that's the whole point of the e-SIG, is to drive those things forward across those multiple stakeholders. So there are things I can see coming up. I was just going to take a quick straw poll now while we're together, if there was anything else coming up that you guys felt we should discuss or start to put on the radar. And then I think we're going to need some sort of mechanism. We've got the meeting notes and the agenda, which people can fill in with a PR beforehand. We've got the Zulip discussions going on in the embedded SIG, which is fantastic. But there are topics and things that we want to make sure we capture in between our meetings so that we don't lose as well.
Sorry, one thing. You mentioned a Zulu chat and a GitHub comment from Christoph. Do you have the links at hand right now?
Mm-hmm.
So I would put them in the chat for that we're all on the same page. Yeah, thanks.
Let's do that.
Or Christoph has his hand raised already.
Yeah, I've found something which is very interesting and which I just stumbled over by accident. There's a build target discussion which just originated on the I think it was a Bytecode Alliance meeting or component model meeting 3 weeks ago. So they're defining basically a new way of mapping VIT to symbols. So if you ever see the CM32P2 prefix with a bar, this is a new way of defining these symbols. And there's a full discussion about this. Okay. I did not get the right link here, but let me quickly see whether I can find that one. Yep. This is a very interesting discussion, which because it also gives a new binary target, which is not a component, but just a normal module, but with the VASI P2 interface and a standardized variant of the VASI P2 interface. So this is very interesting.
Thanks for sharing, Christoph.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else coming up people have seen that they want to make sure we put in here? I know there was some work Luke had discussed about using WIT but generating WebAssembly module interfaces rather than component model interfaces. I know he'd also had voiced that idea too.
I feel this is the same I just shared.
Yeah. We have everything we need to talk about sorted. The world is great. Let's move on. I'm sure people will think of ideas or topics will come up for discussion. I know there are multiple concepts floating around for sharing memory between modules and hardware and modules. And Christoph, you mentioned mmap in some of the discussions. Have you successfully used mmap with WASMtime or WAMA yet?
No, I was also just going for a more high-level interface, which is more modeled after the IceOryx 2 interface, which would just be handing out read-only access to several participants, exclusive or handing wide only access to the same memory region to a single component. So for writing and reading, and this is basically modeled after the IceOryx publisher subscriber
Okay, cool.
API, which I really like. It's very simple and it's very efficient.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, which is once you share memory, then you've got to talk about synchronization mechanisms. That gets kind of interesting and opens up a whole new set of problems for how you do that. And synchronization, shared memory, which leads me to my next thought, which is threading. And Andrew Brown from Intel presented at the Plumbers Summit. I don't know if everybody got to see it. I believe the videos are all up on YouTube. But what he was talking about, and this also is kind of exciting too, is WASI Threads has kind of stopped its development so far. He's trying to kick it back off again. And he explained in the Plumbers Summit that one of the reasons why he hasn't continued with that work is there hasn't been a big pull from the Bytecode Alliance community to have WASI Threads back up and running. So it kind of put in the back burner. Certainly threading, I know, is of interest to multiple people here, and certainly for us, it's a big thing. But when we get to threading for embedded systems, there are multiple modules, multiple mechanisms of implementing it, and how you would embed software within a multi-threaded environment. And you can see some of that realized in the WAMA code base, where they do threading, which is just simply a pass through to the host OS's threading mechanism, which is really interesting because that allows you to tightly couple and embed the WebAssembly code with the existing operating system's threading concepts. So if you're integrating your WebAssembly code with native code and you need to streamline that in a thread, you've got the ability to do that, and you can synchronize between code written in WebAssembly from a third party, which is then using the same synchronization primitives as the host operating system. So you can synchronize across host and third-party code, which becomes really useful. And I can see a need for that. And then there is more of what I believe Luke was describing in some of the Plumbers Summit discussion, where from a component model point of view, I think the current concept is that at the point at which native code is passing, it would essentially pass a message through to whatever's executing WebAssembly. And the threading models, therefore, would be kind of disconnected. So it's you are passing a message from host to guest, passing a message from native to your WebAssembly code base. And the threading models there are completely disconnected. So you don't have that tight coupling between the host OS and the guest necessarily. And I think all of that is kind of in an interesting discussion space, and particularly for embedded systems where you're controlling some sort of physical piece of equipment, where you might actually prefer to have more of the embedded use case where you're using the host operating system's threading model rather than this message passing decoupled version, depending on timing and latency, and where you want to avoid perhaps some form of scheduling constraints that might occur. So all of those non-functional timing requirements, behavioral requirements will start to kick in as we look at threading in general. And I think that perspective, at least from the embedded side, is something that I imagine might not be top of the list for those people looking at threading and WebAssembly in the cloud environment. So I do think that'd be another really important discussion point for us to, as an embedded community, to give some guidance on and some use cases. And I know that Andy from Intel had specifically asked for people to come to him with use cases and descriptions of it to give him some feedback on the design space and the need in the community. So that's certainly something I think we should keep an eye out for. That threading was a big thing for me that came out in the Plumbers Summit. The other big thing was the direction that the Preview 3 is going in, and the resolution of some of the mallocs. the other really exciting bits, the stuff I think Christoph's just mentioned, and the work on the shared memory concepts, which then gets really exciting. So we start to see things kind of, I think overall heading in a quite an embedded friendly direction overall, which is really kind of exciting. Was there anything else people have seen that we think we need to start bringing up? And I ask because I guess part of the role of the co-chairs for the SIG is to try and make sure we have things that we see on the radar front loaded as a discussion list that we have to deal with, or we should as an embedded community address, so that we can give the guidance to everybody else on what's important too. So is there anything else coming up you guys have seen?
So for thread, sorry,
sorry.
Dominic, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that the list of Chris was pretty much fitting to my needs. So please go on.
I just saw that there was actually a second revision of threads, which was basically the shared everything threading proposal, and that one already was integrated into the component model specification. So there's already some actually getting together there, and I also saw it in the WASM tools parser. So there's clearly a lot of implementation going on when it comes to implementing this new way of just spawning threads, which is the new proposal by the symmetric threads proposal. And I'm really looking forward to just having these things which are compatible with, well, compatible in quotes with the component model. At least it's not directly excluded, and the tool supported. And I just know why I need threads, because it's I just have C++ code around, and that uses asynchronous calls which are using multiple threads because concurrency TS never made it to standard.
Right. Well, speaking of asynchronous calls, that leads on to the other thing which is currently in discussion from the larger, I guess, core WebAssembly group, and that's stack switching, which would be another topic I think we should pay attention to. Issues that come up where this would be really kind of interesting is, hey, how do you handle signals and signal handling and user code? At the moment, there's a WASI stub, which just allows you to compile code, which needs signals, but it doesn't actually deal with the signal at all, doesn't trap it, there's no handler. You could implement it in the host and try and pass through a mechanism. You could set some flags in memory, but there's no way at the moment to interrupt the execution of the running WebAssembly code, pause it, and force the signal handler to run. It just doesn't exist at the moment. So things like that. And it would also overlap, of course, into mechanisms for dealing with interrupts if you're going to go super low level, your WebAssembly.
So I've done some research in that field, but of course it's nothing that is even close to being production ready. It's only, well, local playground, so to say.
Okay, cool. So maybe we should schedule some educational sessions to learn what you've learnt, Max.
Yeah, we can see.
So that would be good. Cool. I'm just gonna, because we're here, we've got the time, and we're getting close to I think getting this list done, which is great. Just starting on the next thing. And just to make sure we try and capture everybody's view, I see some other participants in the call who've been very quiet. So Stephen, any input on this one? Put down a cup of coffee.
Cup of tea this afternoon.
Tea, very good.
No, I too, I didn't chime in because I agreed. I think the WASM thread stuff, or sorry, WASI thread stuff is something of interest to us as well, especially from the embedded side. And then you already mentioned the other thing I was concerned about with that is taking sort of the component definition WIT and compiling that to a module. So you've covered the two things that I was wanting to hear. So
Cool. All right.
yeah, so we have interest in both of those, just to be clear.
Okay. Cool. All right, so we've got a brief outline of stuff we need to talk about. That I think one of us should kick off a discussion in Zulip around that list of things coming up that we need to think about, just so we can keep it active. I can start a topic on that after this meeting, and I'll do the embedded SIG target document swag pass for the table. After we've done that, then I am going to suggest, and I will ping Zulip and send an email out and go, hey guys, this document, unless there's any significant objections, if it's still good by, I guess, a week from today, maybe 2 weeks from today, next meeting, that it won't be on the agenda anymore, and we will just commit the PR and move on, and that will be it. And we can then start taking the items off our topic list as things that we need to discuss or give some feedback on, or have some ideas on implementation strategies that we should share between ourselves and the wider community. And the thing that's coming up for me, which would be really interesting, is the shared memory stuff, because I can see some thinking going on with Christoph and Luke, and I can see some implementation going on with the WAMA team. And I know internally we've done some tire kicking with MMAP as well with WAMA. So there's stuff here. There's stuff here we need to talk about, I think. But I'm sure there's other topics that will come up too. So unless there's anything super critical to talk about, I'm happy to wrap up the eSIG meeting a little earlier. Ralph managed to pop in, give me a to-do item, and drop off the call early, which was epic. Love it. So yeah.
One thing I would add just real quick, and it's
Yeah.
related to WIT components and modules in the context of embedded. I think once we understanding how those map and how we would support those in the embedded space, particularly on runtimes such as WAMR that today don't support the component model. So that's one topic. The next topic though is, what are the interfaces that we want to create or define that are specific to the embedded space? So I think for me, that's some of the interesting API and interface work that I'd like to see us start working on. Things like, I know there was an I2C interface, a GPIO interface proposed. I don't think they've moved forward much. I would imagine there's other things that in the embedded world we'd like interfaces for, or like to start discussing and then hashing out what an interface would be. And so I think it'd be really interesting to see what are those interfaces and what are the priorities that people see those. And then should we start tackling some of those in this group? I know that's probably a few weeks out from now, but I think it's something to start thinking about.
And that brings me up another discussion. We started thinking about mmap, and we went, oh, okay, mmap, give it a string path identifier. Oh, okay, security model. Who gets access to what mmap string paths? How do we secure it? Do we take a leaf out of what we do with the file system in WAMA? And the networking mechanisms in WAMA? What would a security model look like? How would you provide access and access control? Yeah. So that's we got that far as well. Went, oh, there's more to think about here. So, and then I think the other thing that started to come up as well is if you can develop a component which is native but provides a component interface that you could link against from WebAssembly. So you can compose with native versions or with WebAssembly polyfill versions of components. Obviously, the WebAssembly polyfill versions of components are bound by the WebAssembly security model, but the native ones aren't. And how would you implement security models in your native code? And is there a standard pattern for that that we can replicate? So things like that started to come up. So again, yeah. Oh man, I'm adding more items to the discussion list, but I'm gonna have to go back through and watch the video and make notes. Because I think we forgot to choose a note taker for today. Okay. So awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Good call. In that case, unless anybody has anything else to discuss, I propose we wrap it up.
I'm curious if there's any public information about your work, Max, because I'm not aware where to look for that. So
Not yet. That's
okay.
also why I was a bit, not that open. But there will be probably some public work, I hope, in 1.5 months. And I will reach out to you and give you some information if you're interested.
I am. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Maybe that's I think the stuff you were working on also, Max, was related to the I2C interfaces and the GPIO stuff too, right?
Yeah, it's not directly related, but yeah, it's the same areas, let's say.
So I think once the application approval is through, we can use this group to give you a wider audience, Max. And
yeah.
Cool. All right.
And if you want to take a look at the potential implementation of shared memory control, so just I'm just linking to the IceOryx 2 API. So something like that is really what comes to my mind when it gets to really controlling access to the to shared memory.
That sounds good. And then I think one of the things that came up in the discussion that you had with Luke was in-memory access to zero copy access to data structures.
Yep.
And one of the things we've been thinking about is how do you describe a plain old C struct in a architecture neutral way, because I want to be able to access the fields and mitigate the risk of padding shifts from compilers between architectures. So then leads into a whole very interesting discussion on how you would do that. And there are multiple solutions for this, but doing that would be really great because then we could have safe, reliable host access to 32-bit WASM data structures and access in memory in place and not worry about it. But I think it requires some additional metadata around the structure. But is there a generalized way in which we can do this? And we'd need to do it in C rather than C++. So
My best answer would be just start from WIT and then generate the C structure from there. Because it's well defined when it comes to padding, alignment, and all these things. So it's already binarily defined. So I think that's the better option instead of just starting from an nearly defined C structure and then trying to get an interface from that one.
I know most of the stuff we've started to see is brownfield experimentation with WebAssembly. Take this code and put it into a WebAssembly and encapsulate it, and I need the host to have access to it, where the host can be 64-bit or 32-bit and different operating systems. And then you end up, well, I have a large selection of different data structures and risks involved in re-implementing the data, re-implementing them. What's the best way to provide safe access? And that's I think going to be solving that problem, or looking at how you would do that in an efficient way for a large existing code base would provide a great boon for the overall community in adopting WebAssembly for existing open source projects in general and existing code bases in general, lowering the cost of adoption. But it's interesting. Like, could you graft something onto an existing structure rather than have to create one from scratch to replace it?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you could define things in C, because you have super fine-grained control, that are not easily mappable to WIT. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that's the case. So I think if you're trying to map existing stuff into like an interface, that might be a challenge. What you might end up having to do, and this is just a wild guess though, is if you have a custom data structure from native host and you want to use that in WebAssembly, you might have to just pass it as an opaque blob of bytes, and then decode it with a similar C structure inside WebAssembly. Pass it as a block of memory. That'd be the only way I think you could feasibly do any crazy thing you do in C to any crazy thing you do in C, but in WASM.
Yeah. So you just run into where
it's ugly.
It's not an easy problem, because
No.
you run into the wonderful world of like, well, you've got different. So you either define the packing constraints in the C struct on both sides, which means you can interchange the data, which is great, but it often results in performance hits because you haven't got byte aligned memory access for certain fields in the structure. So if you're doing really performant code where you need to have that performance there, you're penalizing somebody. So having the ability to decide who gets penalized is good, and where those byte alignments happen, then that would be kind of interesting. So you end up it opens up this whole kettle of worms where you're like, oh yeah, let's make it work really efficiently. Well, I don't want to pass the compiler directive to pack, because then things don't align properly. I can't have unpacked structures on both sides of the boundary because they pad differently, so they don't actually match. There's no guarantee that they'll line up. So so then there's all sorts of concepts around, well, why don't you provide a metadata struct that provides you with the field offset calculations for the most preferred bit packing format, and just force the other side to use it to do a lookup. And then you introduce access performance degradation on one side, because you've got to do at very least a macro and a field offset and some casting operations. So yeah, there's no easy solution to it, but it's either that or rewrite your entire interface with WIT, which is probably going to be more risk adverse, perhaps. I don't know. It's an investigation that needs to be done to work out, best practice and guidance and that sort of stuff for the large code bases, but big open question. Oh man, I rat holed on that one. Right.
I would be
Folks.
scared to just having the task of guessing the right compiler flags to get the correct padding.
Yeah. So at the very least, C has field offset macros. So you can calculate you can get the compiler that originated the base version that you want to use to generate the field offset calculations for each field in a struct. And you could store that as metadata and then use that as a lookup table. So that solves the problem of trying to guess the packing constraints between either side and trying to deal with whatever compiler flavors are on each side doing different things. So that solves that problem, but introduces another one. So it's yeah, there's no easy solution. So if there was, we wouldn't need to talk about it or brainstorm about it. But there you go. Right. Folks, I think I've waffled on for nearly an hour when I have a to-do item from Ralph. So if there's nothing else, then let's say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of the day, evening if you're in Europe, and I will see you in the emails in Zulip between now and next time.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
See you guys. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Stop the recording.